Hello, my name is Danielle. I'm 30 years old and I live in the Boston, Massachusetts area. I was born with a muscle disease, but the name of it is still unknown because it's still considered an undiagnosed disease. Since I had it, since I was born, I've gone through my whole life with it, school, career, all that. So it's definitely kind of affected my life in different ways. School work itself, the academics, were something that I excelled at. So that's definitely something I put a lot of energy to. And I switched careers. Originally, I was in the sciences, but now I'm in marketing and business, and that's a good fit for me because I like it a lot, and I've found ways to educate about rare disease and disability in this way. So, yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you for coming back to another episode of Office Hours with one of your hosts, D Smooth, and I'm not alone.
I'm your other host, Nick. What's going on, everybody?
Yes, and we have our beautiful guest Danielle. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, take it away, Nick.
When was the first time you really felt like you started analyzing media for disability representation? Because that's something that's really specific. That's not something everybody's looking at or for.
Yeah, so I've always been someone that is enjoyed like pop culture and all that, but it wasn't until I like started getting more involved in the disability community that I started looking at it and how it's represented in media. And that was honestly when I first started making content a few years ago. So honestly, my mid-20s, even though I've always been disabled, I didn't feel it's connected to the disability community because I kind of viewed myself as more having a disease. But once I felt more part of a community, then I started kind of noticing things in media more.
Words are powerful, right? And they all have different meanings to different people. They're not, it's no universal language. Everybody has a different meaning, what they bring to something.
How does the word disability, or what has the disability community done to make you feel like it doesn't represent your life experience
Oh, I think
and made
it's
you kind of internalize the word disease and not disability?
yeah. Okay, yeah, good question. I think it has less to do with like the actual people in the community and more to do with
Okay.
like kind of going back to like representation and how society views disability. Like a lot
Hmm.
of times it's depicted as so it was how I viewed it as people who use wheelchairs are disabled, and then
Mm.
that's the community, but it's a lot more diverse than that, and it's comprised of a lot more different types of disability, but that's the way I think it was kind of depicted in media and in society. So that's why I didn't want to intrude upon that community. So that's why I kind of um didn't like try to become part of the community sooner because I didn't want to feel like I was intruding on a space I didn't belong because I'm not a wheelchair user, and that just felt like more, the people who are, part of that community. That's just the way I kind of viewed it until I became more educated and felt more comfortable, identifying as a member of the disability community.
That I get that.
Yes. So, Danielle, I know earlier you spoke about media and how things are displayed or whatever. So I just want to ask you about shows that I kind of remember or watch growing up as yeah. So ER and Scrubs are two shows that I hope you're familiar with those two shows.
Yeah, I am familiar. If for medical shows, I watch more of like Grey's Anatomy, but I checked out after like maybe like the 12th season. There's like 20,
Okay.
but
You
yeah,
still
but I'm
got a long way.
familiar.
12
I
out of 20 is not bad.
Yes.
yeah, yeah, I know. But yeah, I haven't kept up with it, but yeah, I'm familiar with like that medical type of genre, even though I know
Yeah.
Scrubs has more comedy involved.
Yeah, so I want to ask, do you feel like those two TV shows that I touched on display health and like how they went about things in a good way? Do you feel they did?
I guess you would probably have to take it like episode by episode and see how each disease state or condition was depicted, because sometimes shows do a good job, sometimes they do a not so good job. Like I know there was, I don't know if I'm quoting the right show, but I think it might have been Chicago MD or one of those type of shows had an episode of about a patient with mitochondrial disease a few years ago, and that's what they thought I had growing up, but then they've kind of changed their mind and now they just consider it a undiagnosed muscle disease. But I remember the community wasn't too happy because the doctors on the show kind of referred to it as like a waste bucket diagnosis, where if a person has random symptoms in different organ systems, so like we don't know what it is, what is called mitochondrial disease, and they thought that kind of trivialized the experience and also made it seem like mitochondrial disease wasn't a real diagnosis. So I remember that being kind of controversial. And then I've heard other things where people say like, oh, like Grey's Anatomy, I think has historically been one that has gotten good reviews on how they've depicted certain conditions, and they will sometimes take certain conditions and display them on TV. Like I remember, I think it's like Kawasaki syndrome. I remember there was like an episode of that. I think, or Kawasaki disease. I don't know if it's syndrome or not, but yeah, syndrome. But yeah, that was like one that brought some like attention to it, and other ones as well. But yeah, so I think it just depends. And then there'll be people who work in medical field that will say like, oh, this one's the most realistic, but I think it probably just depends on your specific experience.
Gilmore Girls was a show you enjoy really growing up watching, right?
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, did you have any similarity with the daughter or with the mom you felt?
I kind of I was more like just enjoying like the whole atmosphere because there's a bunch of different characters on the show. But it's funny, like in the early seasons, I probably related more with the daughter because she was like very studious and she was like valedictorian of her high school, and that was me. But then the daughter kind of goes a different path in college, and her kind of like sheltered experience growing up kind of comes out in college, where I don't really feel like I had that experience. So maybe in the later seasons, I'm more like the mom, where she's kind of a little more experienced with the world and all of that. But yeah, but yeah, I guess everyone has their different characters they relate to, you know, in each TV show.
I will say, like on the show, I know you spoke about you speaking about how you like transition from maybe in the early seasons you represent the daughter, later seasons you represent the mom. With your mom lens on, you spoke about how there were certain words, the R word and things that were used in the show that you didn't really grasp your first watch, as a adolescent, as a teenager. And what, if any, impact did that have when you just as an older person, like as a young adult to say like, wow, I'm watching a show and they're using words that are derogatory to people that I care about.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I didn't remember it being used so casually when I first watched, and then when I watched again, and like maybe like 10 years passed in between watches, and I feel like you know mostly the R word has not been used in media as much. But now we're seeing it kind of used online and social media more, especially within the last year. And I definitely think that's a trend that's going in the wrong direction. And I wonder, it kind of just sparked a thought in me, like how much responsibility do creators of shows have to kind of rectify what they made previously? I don't know. It's like it's interesting, like what's the answer? Do they put a disclaimer in the beginning of the episode, like, or do they take it out, or do they, kind of put a message out on social media? Because, all these shows now are streaming on Netflix and they have social media accounts. So it's kind of interesting to see, what the best course of action is, especially if the line is not connected to the plot at all. It serves no purpose other than to potentially be hurtful to people who watch the show. And that's not to say the whole show should be canceled, which is what some people would accuse me of kind of getting at. That's not what I'm getting at. It's just that if you have a whole show and then there's like a moment that's jarring for fans of the show, I feel like that's not really fair to them because then it kind of puts a little bit of a sour note on something that they really enjoy. So I think it's something to think about for people involved in media for sure.
I think that's a reasonable conversation. Like I know Disney, what they do is like especially like their old like 40s, 50s, some 70s and 80s shows. Definitely there are quite a few, which I was surprised. 90s like Aristocrats, Lady and the Tramp, like they all have at the beginning disclaimers. I think Peter Pan has a disclaimer about tropes or stereotypes, things that are used that may be derogatory to certain communities. And so I do think, well, no, I think, yes, some people would characterize what you're advocating for as canceling. I don't see it that way. I see it as when you know more, you should do more. And I don't think it's too much to ask to say, hey, this was made at this time, and we are going to put a disclaimer saying there is language in here that is upsetting and hurtful to certain communities, number one. And number two, I do think people should have a responsibility to be aware. I do think I'm a writer, and I think it is as a creative, you want that expansive, unlimited potential per se to create whatever your heart and mind can, put on a page or put on a screen, whatever it may be, whatever your medium is. But I do think you have a responsibility to make sure you are being sensitive to the communities you're depicting, or you are uh, assessing or analyzing whatever it may be. So I do think that's important in it because a lot of what people learn, especially about marginalized communities, is from media. And so most people don't know anyone with a specific disease or a specific health concern, but they do know, oh, I know Gilmore Girls, or I know House, or I know Scrubs, or ER, or Grey's Anatomy. And on that show, they were saying this about that particular person. And so it's definitely very important that it's represented, I would say, correctly. Do you think that training should be given to creators just to help them understand the gravity of the power that they hold? I would say specifically for visual mediums like TV, like movies, to just give them some context. Because maybe, like I just said, if you don't know anyone with, a health concern, maybe you're not as sympathetic or dialed in to what words or phrases or actions could be seen as harmful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's important to hire disabled people. So it's tricky
Mm-hmm.
because if someone's like just first starting out on their own, they don't have a budget, so
Mm-hmm.
you hope that they kind of do their own research, especially if they're making a character that's part of a community that they're not part of. Like, it's tricky because I don't think people should have to just write about what they know because then that can be a little bit limiting. Like you say, like writers want to create a whole world, but it's important to distinguish what's a character and what's you. So like when I hear the R word, like in a show like Gilmore Girls, I'm like, are they trying to say the character saying it's not a nice person, or is that just the writer writing the joke? So I think it's important to distinguish because sometimes, TVs and movies need a jerk character, you need a villain. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not saying that bad things can't be said, it's just
Mm-hmm.
distinguishing what's the character and what's not. And it's important to incorporate people from that community at each step of the way. So that way it doesn't sound like you're trying to, you know, represent a community that you're not really a part of. I think just like the way to put it's kind of weird. Like the story, the movie, um, oh, I'm forgetting the movie, but there's a few movies that are about like disability that the community is not a fan of, like Me Before You and oh, Million Dollar Baby is the other one. And they were all made by people without disabilities. And it's like they had some like harmful like stereotypes and tropes in there. And it's like, why would you make a movie about a community and then not have like anyone on the team that's part of that community? I think it's pretty ignorant, honestly. And it's just something that, teams need to do better going forward.
I do, and a movie that hasn't come out yet, but there has been some conversation about it in Snow White. There's been some
Oh, yeah.
conversation about how they have portrayed dwarfism and what the impact of having the same trope used literally. Snow White was in the 20s or 30s. If I'm not, I don't. I mean, I'm not a
Yeah.
historian, but it was a long time ago. And if we're still using those same, how far have we progressed? And can I do think Peter Dinklage offered a very nuanced and compelling take that we can still have stories that are dear to our hearts, but we can still evolve them and help see the humanity in all people. And
It's interesting because it's good to do like market research too, because I saw something the other day like it was between like King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne, and they're like two completely different, but they're like same exact age, like white guys from England who live in a castle. But like one's like rock and roll, and then Prince Charles is like the king. So like even though they come from like the same demographics, they're completely different. And it kind of reminds me of that Snow White topic, because I saw where Peter Dinklage had mentioned that, but then I also saw there was other members of the little people community that were like, him saying that cost us acting jobs. So it's like interesting where you can't just take
mm,
one person's perspective, because I kind of didn't think of that, where I
mm,
was like, like that was an interesting, argument on their behalf. So that's where
mm,
you know where he gets a lot of acting roles, because he's established. So I get both point of views, and it's definitely a complicated topic.
and I remember this with Coda. Coda had a lot of like people felt like it's great, but is this a step or is this a moment? And it was, I think history has up until this point said it was a moment, it wasn't a step, unfortunately.
Yeah.
What could help is putting disabled, chronically ill people to deal with various diseases or various health concerns in the leadership, director, producer. I think trying to bring them in, whether it be an actor, whether it be a consultant, whether it be, you're still leaning on the people that are not of the community to make those um, invitations.
Right.
Whereas if you had it on the flip and you said, hey, we're going to put these people of marginalized, into the decision making abilities, like then you might have a different outcome, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's totally true.
Danielle, so if you had the opportunity to make a TV show or a movie about health concerns and things that you know or things you might have went through in life, what would it be like?
Yeah, I think just for me, like a lot of the content I make online has like a humorous spin on it. Like, so I have a series called should I plug myself? My
Yeah.
username is Danielle Elevates, but with an underscore on Instagram. But one of my series is breaking the fourth wall of disability. So I really love the show The Office, and shows like that, like Parks and Rec, where they have that fake documentary crew, like a mockumentary style, because there were so many times in my life where I just like wanted to be like, is anyone seeing this? Because sometimes people act kind of odd when you talk about chronic illness or, disability and things like that. They don't know how to react. And it ends up being funny. Like I do think that the humor in this community should be highlighted more because I think if you like deal with a chronic illness or disability, you do kind of naturally gain a sense of humor as a coping mechanism. Some people more than others, but I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize that the community has a lot of humor in it.
Yeah, you got a humorous guy right here, Dave.
Oh yes,
Dave,
yes, yes,
Dave is a
yes.
comedian. Like so like I totally understand. Like you saying like you develop that sense of humor. Like Dave, he's before he had health concerns, he was the funniest cousin I knew. So like he has always and like when he, after so I'm not gonna tell you a story, Dave, but if you want to dive in, but after he still was the funniest dude I ever knew. So like I totally agree with you saying like when you have health concern, you have to keep laughing just not to cry because
Yeah,
sometimes you can just be
absolutely. Yep.
oh my goodness, is this real life? Like, come
Yeah,
on now.
Yes.
absolutely. Like so many times I've said that. So yeah, if you don't laugh, you'll cry, like you said.
Media or the real world in real world interaction is the biggest or has the most potential for progress for people that are chronically ill, disabled, etc.
Yeah, like I think one of the biggest challenges to social media is like breaking out of like the echo chamber that is like the community. So I feel like I like the fact that the foundation of my followers is a lot of people that relate to the content, but the hope is that we educate people outside of that. And so that's a big question. How do you break outside the bubble? Is it on social media? Is it, in person somehow? I think just having a mix of different types of media and trying to get it to click with a mainstream audience is the ultimate goal, but how to get there is, a bit of a mystery. But I think as a community we'll get there, but again, it's one step at a time because for whatever reason the mainstream society doesn't get that statistically they are more likely to eventually have a disability or chronic illness than go through the life without one, especially if they live to old age. But for whatever reason, that doesn't click. But yeah, hopefully we'll have more progress, each step of the way.
So Danielle, before we get out of here, what would you want to tell the audience a little bit about you or something we haven't touched on that you would like to talk about? What would you want to tell the people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great if more people get involved in like creating content. I already plugged mine. It's on like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. I do vlogs. Like if I go somewhere, I do like accessibility reviews. And accessibility reviews is something I really wish would become more popular because we have so many like influencers out there like pushing places they've gone, but they don't say whether it's accessible and things like that. So I wish people would make more content about that, but I think just like having our stories told and being visible is really important because a lot of mainstream society kind of views us as out of sight, out of mind, and they're okay with it
Yeah.
staying like that. And I am not. So, I just want to see as many people thriving. I said that with an accent by accident. Thriving and being successful. And it is possible to be successful, and everyone's idea of success is different. But just take it one step at a time. And yeah, I just want to see more people out there in the space.
Thank you for coming on, Danielle.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, you're great.
Thank you so much.